Was appeasement a cowardly policy? During the 1930s, Germany repeatedly broke the terms of the Versailles Treaty. Hitler rearmed, he reoccupied the Rhineland, and united with Austria. And in 1938 he turned his sights on Czechoslovakia. Not till 1939, when he invaded Poland, did Britain say stop. So why did Britain not act earlier? Britain's approach to Germany in the 30s is known as appeasement. Some people, like Winston Churchill, thought it was a cowardly policy. But was it? The British Prime Minister from 1937 until 1940 was Neville Chamberlain, and he was closely identified with appeasement. Chamberlain was so convinced that he had the right approach, some people found him arrogant. He certainly tried hard to make it work. He made 3 trips to Germany by air to negotiate with Hitler over Czechoslovakia. This is how Chamberlain described appeasement.
By the exercise of friendliness and understanding of what were the desires of others, to clear up all differences by discussion without armed conflict.
Hitler used the threat of armed conflict a number of times to achieve his ends. As part of his plan to take over Czechoslovakia, he threatened to invade one part of it, the Sudetenland, claiming that the German-speaking people living there were being persecuted by the Czech government.
Since he took office, Mr. Chamberlain has never wavered in his determination to establish peace in Europe.
So Chamberlain visited Hitler at his mountaintop residence in Berchtesgaden to cut a deal.
In courteous but perfectly definite terms, Herr Hitler made it plain that he had made up his mind that the Sudeten Germans must have the right of self-determination. And he declared categorically that rather than wait, he would be prepared to risk a world war. I undertook to return at once to consult with my colleagues. I have no doubt whatever now, looking back, that my visit alone prevented an invasion for which everything was ready.
Chamberlain went back to Hitler a second time, quite confident now that they had an agreement. But at that point, Hitler stepped up his demands and threatened war unless he could have the Sudetenland immediately. In desperation, Britain, France, Germany and Italy met at Munich and agreed to Hitler's terms. The Czech leader Beneš was in Munich too, but Hitler refused to let him enter the conference room. Later, Beneš wrote in his memoirs,
I had sufficient diplomatic experience to see that Europe was hastening to its doom as a result of universal selfishness. Without our participation, the Munich Agreement, fatal for Europe and the whole world, was concluded and signed by the 4 great powers and then forced upon us.
For Beneš then, appeasement meant that Britain would avoid getting into a war whatever the cost to others. But Chamberlain believed that Hitler did have some reasonable demands, and he had extracted a promise from Hitler that he would make no more territorial demands in Europe. But 6 months later, in March 1939, the Germans annexed the main part of what was left of Czechoslovakia. Hitler had broken his promise to Chamberlain, and that same month Chamberlain changed his policy. Britain signed a pact promising to protect Poland. This was supposed to send a signal to Hitler that Britain would not accept further German expansion. Britain prepared for war. But Hitler didn't believe the British would go to war over Poland, since they hadn't stood up to him over Czechoslovakia. Hitler went ahead with his invasion, and Britain declared war on Germany on the 3rd of September 1939. Appeasement had been abandoned.